Let's start on our sugar flowers. So here I have 16 ounces of white fondant. You can use whichever kind you'd like. And I've added about a quarter teaspoon of CMC powder. I'm going to insert a picture of exactly what that looks like here. You can use CMC, you can use Tylose powder. What we're looking for is that hardening agent that's going to harden up our flowers. So I don't want to start with white flowers here. I think I want to start with a very, very light blue. I think that's going to help us shade them better later. So let's add just a tiny bit. This is our same airbrush color that we were using earlier. If you've got a gel, you can use that. But I'm going to just kind of for continuity here stick with using the airbrush. And then anytime you mix your fondant, be sure that you are putting down some cornstarch. That's going to help so that the fondant does not get sticky. And let's just work this in. So I'm just kneading it just like you would knead any sort of a dough. And we're just going to wait until we get a nice uniformity of color here. If you start to get sticky, put down some more cornstarch. And all we're going for here is a light blue. I realize it's not the same periwinkle that we used for our ganache for the spatula, the offset spatula palette knife technique on our cake, but that's okay. We just need a base color for our flowers, and that's going to make coloring them with the airbrush later so much easier. So let's start with our large flowers. These are soap molds that I've linked on our page, and I've kind of cut, it's a little harder, it's easier to see on this one. I've kind of cut the lip off of these molds, and it makes it just all that much easier to get the flowers back out. So I'm going to put some cornstarch in and then tap out the excess. Okay, same thing on here. Put some in, tap out the excess, and I'm going to work, whenever I do molds like this, I'm going to work my fondant into a smooth portion. You can see that there's no lines or cracks. That's what's going to go down into the mold. Okay, that's going to give me the best mold possible. And you can see I've got a little bit too much, so I'm just going to pull some off. And I'm really going to push in with these types of molds. There's a lot of little crevices that we want to make sure our fondant gets into. Let that sit for just a second, and we'll do the same thing to this guy. Okay, pull some out, and we're going to work it a little bit and get, same thing as before, get a nice smooth portion that we can push down into the bottom of the mold. Pull off the excess and work it in just like we did before. Work it in really well. Okay, let that guy set for a second. And I'm going to put some cornstarch. This little pan right here is just where I'm going to put my finished flowers. Just going to put some cornstarch down, make sure nothing's going to get sticky on me. So let's grab our first guy, and I'm pushing from the bottom portion of my mold, and I'm peeling the sides. So I'm pushing and I'm peeling. Okay, once it starts to get, just let gravity help us out. Okay, and there's one. And we'll do the same thing here. Okay, you can see that cornstarch just helps everything pop out really easily. Now these guys are a little bit closed for my liking. So I'm going to grab one of my fondant tools, and I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to pull out some of these petals, okay? I'm just pushing them down, pulling them out. Just don't want, and I'm kind of squeeze down here. This extra is where I'm going to hold it. I just don't want the flower to feel as closed as it feels right now. So I'm just going to kind of work to open up some of these petals here. Okay, let's open a little bit here in the center. Just kind of give it, okay, there we go. Just open it up a little bit, and we're going to set that on our tray to dry. This one looks pretty good to me. This is kind of a closed peony, but if you want, you can sort of do that same technique and just go in and pull out some of these little petals. Okay, we can also kind of round the sides out a little bit here, but those are two really simple, larger flowers just from a mold. We don't have to make individual petals. These are also not going to be wired. They're heavier, so wiring them would be pretty difficult. Get some more cornstarch in my molds. Okay, so I think we'll make 4 of these larger ones. We're definitely not going to use, I shouldn't say that, we're probably not going to use all 4. But in the case of sugar flowers, and one of the things that makes them expensive is that I would rather have more of them than I need and not be stuck with less. Okay, so we're just going to push these into the molds there. Okay, and we'll go ahead and unmold this one. Just right down. Okay, and we'll unmold this guy. So let's take a look too at the difference. So here's the one we opened up a little bit, and then there's the one right out of the mold. So you can see that just slightly opening up of those flowers, just petals, I should say, just makes that flower look so much nicer. So let's do the same thing here. And again, we're just going in and we're just pushing out, okay, where some of these petals naturally break. We can go in and kind of define the center a little bit. Okay, so don't feel like when you get a mold that you are stuck with exactly the way that mold looks, because you're definitely not. You can manipulate these molds. Okay, just a little bit more open. And then this guy, I'm just going to kind of pinch the sides so he puffs up a little bit on the top. All right, so there's those 4 we'll use as our large ones. And we'll move on to this one. So these are called plumeria. Normally when you look them up, this is the larger one that I want to grab. And this is the same thing. We're just going to do a little bit of cornstarch, and we're just going to work our way into, okay, we're just working our way into the mold. Okay, that's, we actually got way too much right there. Okay, so just push it in. And these I would like to put on wires. So I'm going to show you how we do that. You can see right here how I've kind of got a little mound. Let me get my hand out of the way. Got a little mound there on top. It's not perfectly flat. I'm just going to pinch that mound. Okay, so I've put more into the mold than I needed. Okay, and I'm just going to pinch that little mound up. Okay, and that's going to be where I'm going to put my wire in. That's a really easy, simple way. Okay, so look how pretty that is right out of the mold. So let's do maybe 8 of these, and then we'll put our wires in. All right, let's do a couple more together. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little bit of cornstarch on my mold. Okay, and I'm just pushing my fondant here into the mold. Okay, now if you left a little bit too much there on the top, just pinch it off. Okay, and I would say this little mound that I'm leaving is maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch in height. Let's look at that again. Here, let's pop it out so we can see it well. So see, a little mound, we just left it on the back of the mold. Okay, pretty little plumeria. Let's do one more. Grab these scraps. Okay. So we're just pushing into the mold all the way around. Okay, if you've gotten a little too much, like I have, just pull it off. Okay, work all those petals in. We want to make sure we get all of the beautiful petal work that's in that mold, all that beautiful detail. We want to make sure we get it. Okay, there it is again. And we'll just pop it out. It's a good little image of our. Okay, so now let's grab these guys. We've got 8 of them here. And as you can see, when I'm moving these around, that CMC powder is already starting to stiffen things up. So if things are droopy on you at this point, you don't have enough CMC powder, so add a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to take my 8mm wire. Okay, go longer than you think you need. You can always cut it off later. Okay, and I'm going to take the tip and I'm just going to bend it. Okay, this is what's going to keep it secure in my flower. Okay, you see we've just got that tip bent a little bit. Okay, I'm going to dip it in my water. Okay, and then it's going to go right into that little mound that we made. Okay. All right, we just poked the wire right in. Haven't come out through the other side. We've just poked the wire right in. Okay, so that can sit right there. All right, let's do it again. Just gonna bend the wire over, and this is just so it stays in our flower. We're gonna dip it in the water. Okay, and we're just going to push it right into that little mound we made. Okay, and you can squeeze it so that we've got a nice, everything adheres really well right there. Okay, so there's another one. And we're just going to keep going. Spin the end of our wire. Okay, dip it in the water. Poke it into the mound we made on the back of the flower. Close it up with our fingers. Okay, we're just going to do all 8 of these just like that. All right, let's move on to the peony petals that we're going to do. So we're going to cut 8 of these, and this is the second largest of the peony cutters in the set. So that's the one I've grabbed there. Remember, when you're not using your fondant, it's got to go in a bag. You've got to keep it covered. You can't just let it sit to dry out. All right, let's work on these peonies right here. So we've got all the guys that we just cut. And we're going to give these a little bit of a pattern and thin them out slightly. So I've got the little poofy right here. And I'm just going to lay it down. And I'm going to get some cornstarch on my ball tool. And I'm going to start at the end, and I'm going to pull towards me. I'm going to start at the end and pull towards me. I'm going to do that 4 times all the way around. Okay, and it's just giving it, you can see, just a little bit of a shape. All right, so we're just thinning out that edge, and we're pushing down pretty hard. We're trying to thin this edge out. All right, so let's go and do that for all of these. So we're just pulling towards us, pushing down, okay, pushing down and pulling towards you. Okay, we're just thinning out those edges. Okay, thin out those edges. Pull them towards you. Okay, and if you go a little bit too thin, don't worry, okay? It's a flower. They all look different. We don't have to be super duper perfect. The only thing I'm going to tell you to stay away from is torn or tattered edges. Those to me don't look super realistic. So we're going to stay away from sort of torn and tattered edges. Okay, almost done. And we're going to give these just a little bit of a pattern, not too much, but just a tiny bit. Okay, and to get that pattern in there, all I'm going to do is take my flat tip and I'm just going to draw a few lines in. Okay, so we're not doing anything difficult or heavy. Okay, we're just putting a few little lines. Okay, super simple. Okay, just some lines. All right, now I'm not worried about covering these petals as I work. mainly because I've only got 8 of them. It's not a huge amount that I can't keep rotating before they get stiff. If you were to really, really like this petal and want to make more of them for your cake, I would recommend only working on 8 at a time. That seems to be a good number, 8, before anything starts to stiffen up or dry out on you. You see, we're just kind of putting lines in. And all these lines are really going to do for us is when we airbrush the flowers in a little bit, the lines are going to get picked up in the airbrush paint. And it's just going to give our petals that much more dimension, just a little something where they're not just a flat petal, just a tiny little bit of something. Now, to put these on the wires, I'm not going to put a wire up through. They're a bit too thin for that. What I'm going to do, dip my wire in the water, and I'm going to wrap the end of the petal with the wire. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of twist it and wrap down. Okay, and then that's going to be that guy. Now I can take the edge of my pan here that I'm using to dry everything with. Let me kind of tilt him so he comes into the picture. And I can lean this petal up against the edge here, and I can just give it a little bit of shape as it dries, just a tiny bit, and it'll dry in that shape for us. So let's do another one. Okay, a little bit of water on our wire, and we're just going to close our wire up in the flower. I remember I said these were super easy. Okay. Right, and then we're just going to lay it down to dry. And these petals can, I mean, you can droop them and shape them any way you want, but I think they look nice when they're sort of cupped. Okay. Well, let's do another one. So if you're more comfortable, we can put water on the petal as opposed to on our wire. And we're just going to put it in the end. Okay. And we're going to twist it up, pinching the ends so it seals for us. Okay, and we're going to lay it right. Okay. And we'll do it again. Put a little bit of water on our petal. We'll take our wire and we're just going to wrap it up. Okay, and when you wrap, make sure you pinch that end. Okay, so that everything's nice and secure. And then it just goes right on your pan. Okay, and remember, we've got a little bit of cornstarch on our pan. So just in case we get some water on the edges. Oh, come here now. Okay, in case we get some water on the edges of these, we're not going to get anything sticky. We've got that cornstarch. Remember, steal really good here at the very end. Kind of fluff it back open. Look how pretty that is. All right, so we're going to do that for all 8 of these. Okay, and then you can see they're just sitting in our pan and they're just going to dry exactly the way we put them. All right, these right here, we are not, well, let's show you the mulch first. So this is the largest of this set, okay, this particular kind that comes with the set. And to get this imprint, we're going to push down with the cutter, and then we're going to push down with the plunger. Okay, and push down with the cutter and push down with the plunger. Okay, and we'll do 5 of these. Push down and push down. Okay. And pull these out. And again, remember your fondant's got to be stored when you're not using it. So this excess, I'm just going to pop right back into my plastic bag. Okay. Now these guys we're not going to wire. Okay, but I will pick off any of this like excess happening on them. Okay, so we're going to go back onto our little fluffy mat, and we're just going to take our ball tool and we're just going to indent these edges. This is really easy. Just boom, boom, boom. Okay, and then once in the middle. Okay, and we'll do that to all of these. Okay, each edge. Okay, and then once in the middle. And this is just going to help it cup when we lay it down to dry. And again, we're thinning out those edges. It's just going to be a little something extra that makes our flowers look a little bit more real. Okay, let's do this last one. Okay, now for these guys to dry any other way except for completely flat like that, we need a mold, essentially. I don't have a lot of flower formers, but I absolutely love old egg cartons. Okay, so he just goes right in there. Okay, and can you see? It's going to dry exactly in that shape, and it will pop right out of the egg carton for us when we are done with it. So we're just going to fill this up with these guys right here. And again, they will dry exactly like that in that pretty little rounded shape. Okay, let's move on to our next one. Now for these guys, we've got our fondant rolled a little bit thicker. I would say we're at about 1/4 of an inch. And I want these to be thicker because these are going to be sort of clumps. We're going to kind of clump these together. These are 2 of the hydrangea cutters that come in that set, the largest and then the second largest. And we're just going to, same thing, push down and then get the imprint. Okay, and we're going to do groups of 4 of these. Okay. Okay, and then we're going to cluster these groups of 4 together. Whoops, look at that guy. We didn't get our little imprint on him. See if we can get him back in there. Sort of. Okay. So we forgot to do his imprint. So there we go. Okay. And then we'll take our next one. Okay, don't forget, because I seem to be forgetting here. Okay, cut and then plunge. So you get the imprint. Don't forget the plunge part. Okay, and we're going to have a larger cluster and a smaller cluster. And let's do 2 of the larger clusters. I like how those look, and they'll take up a little bit more space for us too. Now these we're not going to use the ball tool to manipulate at all. Okay, we're just going to kind of cluster them together. sort of like you'd see a hydrangea. Okay, again, I'm a broken record. Back into the bag. Okay. So all we're going to do here, okay, is take our water and we're just going to put some on 2 of the edges and then connect the next one. Okay, so see, we just got, whoop, just like that. Easy peasy. Okay, and then we'll do it again. Well, come here now. Okay, we'll do it again. We'll connect that one. Okay, and then we'll get this guy. And 2 and 2. Okay, and see, and then we've kind of got a pretty little cluster right there. Okay, and we're going to let these dry just like that. So I'm just going to pick it up and I'm going to put it to dry right on my tray. Okay, and again, all we did, okay, easy peasy, we just connected these ends with a little bit of water. Okay, sort of using the water as our glue. Okay, because the hydrangeas grow in little clusters like that. So that's sort of what we're mimicking here. And then we're just going to pick it up and put it right over on our tray to dry. And then we'll do, we've got a little sticky here, a little bit more cornstarch down, and we'll do the same thing with our tiny one. Okay, we're just putting water on these little ends here. And then we're just connecting them all together. Okay, again, because that's how they grow. The hydrangeas grow in little clusters, just like that. Okay, and then that little cluster can go onto your drying tray. If it's gotten a little wet on the bottom, put some more cornstarch down. All right, so now we've got 3 of the hydrangea bunches. All right, so this next one, when I come back to the other plunge cutter, so let's roll us out some fondant.
Now let's
again.
move on to some little teeny tiny hydrangeas. These are going to be what I like to call filler flower. So the small ones are flowers that we can put sort of all around and anywhere we've got blank space or open space on our cake. These, you'll notice I'm leaving a little bit thicker. I'm going to say this is about 1/4 of an inch thick. When these dry, if we go much thinner, if we smush out these petals any, they are very prone to breaking. So I'm going to leave them a little bit thinner. I'm going to grab my smallest of the ball tools and I'm just going to do an impression, boop, just right there in the middle of both of them. It helps cup the petals just a tiny bit. Just enough to give it a little bit of movement. And I'm going to dry them on my pan so that they're sort of tilted and not laying flat. That's going to go a long way towards giving them some movement too. So you'll see we've got a good bit of these just drying. And let's move on to our last of the wired flowers. So this is the middle size plunge cutter of this little 4-petal flower. Now you'll remember we used the really big version to do the flowers we had in the egg cups right there. So this is the middle one, and we're going to do this. We're going to do this one as we'll call this 2 plunge cutter flower. So I'm going to take some water and I'm going to put just a little bit of water here in the center of the flower. I don't necessarily want the petals stuck together. I just want the center. And you'll see I don't want to line it up perfectly. I want to offset it a little bit so we can make the flower look large and full. And I'm going to take my ball tool, and I'm just going to push it down, give myself a little center right there. And I'm going to grab my 8mm wire. Now this wire, I've already got the little hooks in like we made earlier. So make sure that you've got your little hooks in. And this is going to see how since we made that little indentation with our ball tool, our wire is going to want to push through the top. That's okay, because I think what I'd like to do with these flowers is give them a little center. So I want to get just a little bit of fondant, and I want to grab my impression mat that we're going to use in just a little bit also for the leaves. But this impression mat has a really pretty flower center. This flower is actually, I think, an apple blossom. And I'm just going to use a little bit of fondant here in the center of this flower and pop it right out. Put a little bit of water here on the center of my little flower, and I'm going to push that in. So this is doing two things for us. It's giving us a pretty little flower center, which I like the different shape right there, but it's also covering our wire that poked through. I will say that one is looking a little bit thick to me. So I think on our next one right here, I think I'm going to use my ball tool, and I'm going to thin out these petals just a little bit. I want to give them a little bit more movement. Let's see, no, not that one. Where's my ball tool? Okay, this guy. I'm going to grab the edge of my petal, and I'm going to pull towards the center. So I'm just pushing down at the edge, and I'm pulling towards the center. So this is going to do two things for me. It's going to thin out my petals a little bit, but it's also, you'll see, giving my flower a little bit more shape than if it was just completely flat. So while these flowers aren't going to be ridiculously amazing fondant flowers that we took hours and days to make, we do still want them to have a little bit of movement, a little bit of lifelike characteristics for us. So again, we've got our hooked wire, and we're just going to pop that right up through the center. And you can see I'm twisting it a little bit so that I can really cement that hook in there. And I'm going to grab my impression mat again, and I'm going to make the center of my little flower. And again, what that's doing for me is just giving me a little bit more texture there in the center, and it's covering up the fact that our wire pushed through. So when you have these impression mats, don't feel like you have to just use an entire flower or an entire leaf. You can really, choose little bits and pieces, and, push them through and push them out to get different flowers and different looks. So I like this one a lot better than the first one. So I think we'll continue with that pattern where we use our ball tool and we push out, or push in, I suppose, the petals a little bit. So let's do that one more time. So we're just going to come from the outer edge of the petal, and we're pulling in while we're pushing down. And that's just going to cup our flower a little bit for us. So again, right from the edge, and we're pulling in towards the center, and it's just going to help cup our flower. Now, when we're talking about the hooks on the edge of our wire here, our 8mm wire, I don't think I've discussed yet why we have the hooks. The hooks are going to help grab a hold of the fondant when these flowers are dry. If we just had a straight piece of wire going in, when we moved these around later, the wire is liable to just pop, pull right out. But this little hook that we're making is going to help hold on. It's going to kind of grab onto that fondant. So later, as we're moving this around, this flower around, we're not going to have as much of a chance of the wire pulling out on us. Now, I'm sure you're also asking why I didn't just use the impression mat to make that entire flower. It was a little bit thin for me, so that's why I opted to plunge cut them instead.
All right, for our last little bit here, we're going to take just a little bit we had left over of our blue and have added just a touch of yellow. Okay, and we're going to get a little bit more of a green here. It's not going to be super green, but we just want a little bit of a different base tone to our leaves. We're going to airbrush these, but I wanted them to be a little bit more yellow so that when I airbrush the green over, it will look nice. I'm going to show you a couple different ways we can do the leaves. Okay, the first one is back to our mold that we used the little center of. So this one has a pretty sort of 3-leaf pattern on it. We're not going to wire any of our leaves. I don't really think we need to. I think we'll be fine. Okay, so I'm just pushing my fondant in. I'm not going to make it completely flat because I do want these to have a little bit of bulk on the back. But that's pretty. That's a simple, pretty little leaf. So we'll do a few of this kind. All right, and then we can also do, see how handy that cheater comes in? Okay, we can also make some larger ones. For this one, I'm going to use this cutter. This is Wilton. This is the large rose cutter. And I'm going to take my leaf impression mat. And I'm just going to push here, starting at the bottom. Okay, and I'm just going to push my way up on my leaf. And see, I'll get a nice, pretty impression there. And then I can just let that dry on my tray also. So let's make a few of those. Okay, just cut them out. And then push them down into your mat. Okay, kind of dry them at an angle on our pan so that we get a little bit of movement to them. Okay. And we'll switch back over here. Okay, maybe some of these, this smaller guy right here. I like to have a variety of leaves, if at all possible, when I'm working with sugar flowers. It just ends up looking so much more natural. Oh yeah, see that little guy? He's cute too. Oh, there you are. Okay. So maybe we'll bend those a little bit. So just kind of make a variety. Use up whatever you have left as far as the CMC fondant that we made. It does not keep well. Okay, doesn't matter how many plastic bags we put it in, it just doesn't keep well. So there's no sense in trying to save it. You might as well just go ahead and use it up. And again, these sugar flowers are going to last pretty much indefinitely if you keep them out of direct sunlight and away from water. So while it might seem like we've made a lot extra than we, or more than we need, I should say. Um, if we did, that's fine because they will keep. So don't worry about them keeping. Oh, I just love that one. That one's so pretty. Okay, and we've only got a tiny bit more. So I'm going to try to get one more 3-leaf pushed out of there. All right, now let's take a look at all the flowers that we have made. All right, so here's our tray. We've got leaves, we've got clusters, we've got our large ones, our wired. We've got some more wired ones, our little tiny babies in the back, the pretty peony petals, I won't call them leaves. And then we've got our small tray that we made drying in the little cups. All right, so next we are going to airbrush these, but you're going to let these dry 24 to 48 hours depending on where you're at and the humidity level in the air. So you're going to know they're dry when you can pick them up without anything bending and breaking.